Hi, Darren.
Hey Greg, how are you?
Good. We're going to do maybe a little holiday season video today. Maybe you can tell people what we're going to do here.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. This is something I've wanted you and I to do for a couple of years, but this year we got around to it.
Also, I
Yeah,
resisted last year because it sounded a bit nerdy, and then I realized I am a nerd, so here I am.
you are a highly qualified nerd. Wear
Thank you.
that badge with pride. Um, yeah, this is going to be a fun one because I've been doing this for a couple of years, as I imagine a lot of other nerds are doing. It's called the Advent of Code, and the idea behind it is it's a free website, and it's a challenge for kind of creating interest and motivation and having a fun way to learn coding. Um, and what it all revolves around is, the season of Advent. So basically, the TLDR is from December 1st to the 25th. There is a daily challenge revolving some kind of around one kind of story related to Christmas, and you get to choose whatever method and language that you want to do to solve the puzzles. Each day there's a kind of a first phase of the puzzle, and when you complete that, there's a bonus puzzle. So throughout the season of the Advent of Code, you basically build up stars, and you can earn 2 stars a day. A lot of people use this as a challenge. Some people wake up right at midnight, and I know some of these people. They wake up right at midnight to get, kind of first crack at the challenge. Points are distributed based on how soon you beat it. So great tool for learning a language or honing it, having a bit of Christmas fun, and just, that spirit of competition with your friends, colleagues, fellow nerds, what have you.
So it's kind of like an advent calendar for nerds.
That's exactly what it is.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I've used it in the past. So, like when I wanted to learn Ruby, it was perfect because, as you know, learning a new language, if you don't have a project, it's really hard to just, start building hello world stuff. Which led me to thinking, you know, so I've seen people use spreadsheets and Microsoft Excel to solve some of these problems. And I think that's part of the fun, is how creative can you get in solving these problems. And that, for the past few years, I was thinking, come on, like web reports should be an excellent tool for solving these challenges. And I don't think I've seen it done before. And it's something that I've always wanted to challenge us to do. So yeah, here we are, the 2024 Advent of Code Web Reports Challenge.
So as far as you know, has anybody else ever solved these puzzles with web reports?
Not that I know of. And in past years, I've posted on LinkedIn and kind of asked the question on forums, but uh, I haven't seen it. And part of that is, like, do some people think that maybe Web Reports is, not capable of it, or maybe not technical enough or savvy enough to be able to solve some of these problems. Or maybe, it's end of the year, it's just a timing thing. People are trying to wrap up projects before the new year and stuff. But yeah, from what I've seen, no one has attempted this before.
Right. So spoiler alert, we have attempted it and we built a web report. To be fair, we only did day one. I'm not sure I have the energy to do another 23 days, but we're going to show you what we built. And in fact, we built the exercise in three different ways to kind of show some of the features in web reports and how they affect things like performance. And this is a good performance challenge because the data set that they passed us for the first exercise had two lists of 1,000 items, and we had to process that in various ways to solve the puzzle. And so I played around with a few different techniques so we could combine into this a little bit of I guess, a show and tell around some performance stuff and a few of our subtags that we use for measuring performance and that kind of stuff. So we're going to make this into a whole thing. Do you want to maybe explain roughly, without maybe the entire story, the challenge that we're addressing?
Yeah, absolutely. And while I'm thinking about it too, one thing I got to say is, given a web report, you could technically just create a web report and use it like a text file and solve this using, JavaScript or what have you. Like web report supports
Right.
pretty much any kind of web language. Um, I mean, that's what I would have done because it probably, would have been something that I would have, probably felt more comfortable in solving. But I really got to throw it to you. You did this purely with web reports and really just showcase that web reports without any of the other kind of superfluous client-based stuff. Web reports is exceptionally capable at doing,
Mhm.
solving problems.
Yeah. Yeah, everything's there that you need to solve, I would say, any of these challenges, but certainly the one that we just tried. So,
Yeah. Okay. So yes, for anyone who hasn't seen this before, it's adventofcode.com. You just basically authenticate. I'm using GitHub. And there's some other stuff here like a leaderboard, which we'll share a unique ID to at the end. So if you're interested in challenging us, we'll post that. But yeah, so throughout the Advent calendar, as you can see here, there's 25 different days. We're kind of a few days through it, and I got a lot of catching up to do in terms of my own solutions for this. Each day builds on to a bigger story. Um, so, in previous years, it was parts of Santa's sleigh got lost in the sea, and you got to, navigate through undersea caverns and different things. Um, this one is all around chief historian elves. And, part of what we have to do is we got to figure out 50 different locations that are significant to the North Pole. I don't want to give too many spoilers here because half the fun is kind of reading through this, but basically the process is read for the day where you are in the story. You get uh, some descriptions of the challenge, you get some sample data to try it out, and you get your own data source. Everybody has a complete unique data source, so you can't just share the answer with other people. Everybody will have a different answer. And put in your answer. If you're right, it unlocks the second part of the challenge for the day.
the story aside, the basic challenge, I guess, in terms of what we had to solve, if I can roughly summarize it from memory here, you're going to get two lists of numbers. So integers, there's a little mini list there for test that I use for testing initially. But the list they actually gave me to process has, I think I said earlier, two lists of 1,000 integers.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is you cycle through there, you look in each list, you look for the minimum number in the list at that time. You take those two minimums, you find the difference between them, and you add that into a running total. You do that again, you find again the minimum in each list, you find the difference, you add that to a running total. And somehow they managed to massage that weird algorithm into a story. Um, Kudos to them, but that's what we're going to solve today with a couple of variants of web reports.
That's right. There's 50 stars to collect here, representing the 50 points where the chief historian who is lost may be found. So it sounds like you've already unlocked the first star in the first location. So sounds
I'm
like
very
we're well
proud.
on our way to finding the chief historian, which is fantastic.
So first thing I'm going to show you is this, what you basically given at the start of this, which is, as I said, two lists of 1,000 numbers. And the only thing I did in terms of manual intervention is I edited this and converted the space to commas, which allowed me to process this data in my web report using the document as a data source. So the actual list I started with here, having made that change, this is the list here inside my document. I labeled these columns list 1 and list 2. And then I set up a web report. This is the content of it. And I guess for completeness, it has a data source, which is a document called data list. And this is all set up. And for those of you who haven't used it before, the web report's capable of reading comma-separated values or any other delimited type of content. So we can assume for the moment that we were able to load this file and have a data source that has 1,000 rows of 2 columns. I'm going to step back there. I did 2 examples to start with that are more or less the same. But quickly looking through some of this, besides the comments, I got rid of the HTML. I just wanted to see the pure output from this. I added in a tag because I wanted to do timings on different approaches. So this particular tag you may or may not have seen, but this one will output, when I run the web report, it will show me some timings. This is only useful if you're not worried about other information coming to your screen. When all's said and done, this variable here will show the total that we add up. And I'm using this syntax here, which is what we call a final variable. It means that all of the processing that happens logically from the top to the bottom, the end result of that variable will be shown here, even though it's at the top of the file. So it's the final result. As many of you will know, there are 2 different variable forms. The one we're using elsewhere involves an exclamation mark, and that gives us the current value of any variable as we go through. I've also added in, we have a subtag in our subtag suite called RB Timer, which allows me to set timing points in this. So I've sent one before we process the row section, after, and at the end of this. So when our little algorithm is completed, we'll see how long the algorithm took versus this part where we're pulling together the actual data. In the row section, you'll see we're looking at the first column, the list 1 column, and we're concatenating that value into a string with a comma, and we're doing the same thing for column 2. So when we're done, we'll have a variable called list1 string, which will have comma separated list of all the numbers in list 1, and the same here for list 2. Hopefully with me so far. Having created this string, we're converting it into a list. So now we have a OScript list type structure in list 1 and list 2. Our algorithm is mostly going to run in this for loop here. And to start off with, the variable called total diffs, which is going to take the accumulated value, is set to a 0. Now we have a couple of things here. First thing, we're capturing the length of list 1 and putting that in a variable, and the length of list 2 and putting it in a variable. And this line here includes so I guess you could call this cheating in that we used these subtags in our subtag suite, but from our point of view, these are part of web reports. This one merely allows me, without an if statement, to do a decode which checks whether or not the list 1 length is greater than the list 2 length. And the purpose of this is I wanted whichever, just in case, actually this wasn't really part of the challenge, but in case the lists didn't match, so one had more items than the other, I made sure we iterated at least enough times for the biggest list. That probably wasn't necessary, but I included that in here. The equivalent of that would be something like an if statement where we look at list 1 length and we compare it to list 2 length. So as you can see, it's not really a ton of work. And then we would just set number of items in there. Okay, so that's in here, that's apart from the timer tags, that's the only subtag we're using that is not normally part of core web reports. Now we're doing a for loop. We're going through the number of items, which will be the highest number of those 2 lists. In this case, they're both 1,000. Int list actually converts that number into something that the for loop can iterate through. So the for loop is relatively simple. It's designed for lists and associates and things like that, and it will iterate through everything in them. So we have now a list of numbers, and this will go through 1,000 times. Each time it goes through, the number will be put in the variable I, but we're not really using that here. Now we look at list one. The minimum from list one, we set into a variable called L1 min, and we do the same thing for L2 min. We put in the 0 again, just in case we had somehow an imbalance in the two different lists. We would have a value of 0 if there was no item. Now we have the minimum from list one, we have the minimum from list two, we subtract them. This number will either be negative or positive because I'm not bothering to check which one of these is bigger. We only needed the difference. So I'm using the ABS subtag to convert that number, if it's negative, into positive. So one way or the other, we'll have a positive number, and then we're adding that to total diffs. And that is going to happen for 1,000 times. We'll keep finding the minimum value and subtracting and adding it to total diffs. But each time we do this, we have to remove the item from the list. So if we've just checked, whatever number we've just checked, it might exist more than once in that list. Either way, we've got to remove it, or we'll just cycle through and we'll always be looking at the same numbers. That's the only thing within web reports that took a bit of, I'll say, kludging, was because there isn't really something built into the list subtag or any other subtags particularly that allows you to do this. So we did a couple of things here, some stuff where we converted into a list. We used the pat change. I'm not going to go into this in depth in order to remove that item from the list and set this in a temporary variable, change some stuff back. We end up with list one with that item removed. And we did that again for list two. So this was certainly possible, but it gave us the idea, in fact, that in our subtag suite, having a subtag called list action, similar to a social action, might be useful. And we'll show you an early version of that and how it affects this problem. Okay, so that's basically it.
But does it work?
Well, that's the key. So I'm going to run it. I'm going to run it within our tool here. This is the application analyzer, and you'll see that it takes a little bit of time. Certainly in this mode, the way we're doing it right now, it's going to take about 20 seconds. Hopefully Darren will trim that 20 seconds out of the video. But as you can see here, this sort of information we generated about timings, the actual getting the data source in the row section only took 1 millisecond. So that didn't cost us any time. But the algorithm itself took nearly 23 seconds. This line at the bottom shows this is from the web report's display timing. It shows that the total for the whole web report was 22.738 seconds. The actual query, this is the running of the whole thing in the background, took 18 milliseconds. The 1 millisecond is how long it took us to process that row section. And the rest of it was our algorithm. So that's not stunningly fast, but nonetheless, this turned out to be the correct answer. And so we were pretty pleased with that.
Cool. Very cool.
So I want to show, and this is just for purposes of helping some of you understand how you can improve performance in web reports. As I said, there's quite a lot going on here in terms of removing from the list. So the first thing I'll show you is a version we created here, where we've added in a new subtag called list action. And I'll compare that with the version you just looked at. So we'll step back for a second and look at the one we did initially. And you'll see here, if I do a quick check, we've replaced this area here with the pat change stuff with list1 RB list action remove. So that's our new subtag and what we're going to do. And we're going to build this and put it in our package. Then the same thing for list2. So we've replaced those two paragraphs of code with a single subtag call that is designed to remove items from a list. So let's run this one here. And this one, Darren may not even have to edit out of the video because it's
Big
actually a
change.
mere 7 seconds. So about a third of the time it took to run without that subtag. So it gives you an idea that if you have purpose-built subtags or finding the right subtag to do a job if it exists, as opposed to creating multiple subtags to perform a single task is much faster. So we took that one step further and wanted to give the example that you can also build, if you know how, and we do have training courses on this, build a custom subtag. And it's not something you would do every day for every problem. But if you have something like this, where you have a pure algorithm, it's pure code, it's not referencing content server, it's just running code. We built a subtag, a very quick and dirty one, that does more or less the same thing, but in OScript in the subtag. So we created a subtag called Advent1. And part of the advantage of this too is the subtags that are built for commercial usage, including our list one, you have to cater to all kinds of systems and customers and the possibility that whoever uses it might make a mistake. This one here was purpose-built. There's no error checking. I know exactly how it's going to be used. I've wired it into here. It's only me using it in a specific scenario. And so if you're building something like that and you're not building it for potentially hundreds of people, you can build it in a very efficient way. So this is basically the same thing. We are using a slightly different technique to get the list stuff out, just to show you an alternative. This has virtually no impact on the performance. We compared the original with both types of extraction. This subtag returns the whole data source, and the pluck subtag allows you to take one column from that and put it in a variable. So this is just certainly code-wise more efficient, but to be honest, it made very little difference to the performance of the web report. So if we run this one here, it's done.
Wow.
So this runs in less than a second, and you see the answer here is the same.
Yeah.
846 milliseconds is pretty quick. Now, not everybody knows how to create subtags, and we do run a course for that, and we can talk to the various benefits and where you should use it and where you should not. But there's another little trick or a little tool in web reports that gets really underused, and that's the ability to create OScript within a web report. Now, a lot of people are reluctant to use this. They're worried about the idea of putting OScript in the web report. And of course, not everybody knows how to write OScript. But if you can, you take the time or you get someone to write it, it's very, very heavily insulated from the OScript objects. So it's mostly useful. In this case, I'm not going anywhere near content server. This is just pure OScript manipulating data and returning a value. So it's pretty much the same as the subtag, maybe even a tiny bit faster. So we write the OScript. There's a web reports tag called start script and one called end script. And once you've defined one or more scripts in your web report, you can use the call tag to call them using whatever name you've given the script. To be honest, Darren, the real problem with scripting is probably that it's too safe, in that the original team or our original company put in so many protections against it being misused that I think that OScript developers probably find it a bit cumbersome. So for example, if you want to look up information from content server, you're literally calling web reports tags and subtags. So it's protected by the same API that Web Reports uses. Also, it has to be turned on for the system. There is a list of things you can block, which things the user is allowed to use or not use. So it's pretty heavily regulated. And it's one reason why we don't typically use it in our products, because we don't know for any given customer we deliver a product to whether they have these features turned on or not, or if there's any issue. So we try not to use the scripting feature, but for a lot of customers on your system, it's very useful. And let's see how it runs. We're not going to need edit on this one either. See, 823 milliseconds. I mean, that's virtually identical, to be honest. Interestingly enough, the total time went just over 1 second. So there's something with the scripts when you're running the total package of running the web report takes a little bit longer. But within the actual web report itself, the script was just as fast as the custom subtag. So to summarize, we can definitely solve these challenges with web reports without any scripting or any subtags. And depending on the challenge and which subtags we can use and how efficiently we use them, you can write a very usable solution to these things. And frankly, the performance was never a factor in the challenge, but it was a good opportunity for us to show, firstly, some of the ways you can time these things, tags like the display timing, which you may or may not know about, and how we at Ravenblack will look at some of these problems and why we sometimes create custom subtags, particularly where we have very heavyweight algorithms we're running on code. It's a very safe way to make your code a lot faster. And with that, I'll hand it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, because I mean, I think a lot of developers probably only scratch the surface to what web reports can do. So not only did you solve it, but you solved it in multiple ways, which again is great because like you and I have just been advocating for the fact that web reports is extremely powerful, just as powerful as any other, programming language. And part of it is just understanding what's there and getting used to it and pushing its limits. I really like how you called out the kind of like how the OScript scripting within a web report is set up kind of over secure at first. And like I think that's one of the things you and I with our customers have talked about over the years as well is don't be afraid of the development that you do within a web report, even if it is doing some OScript and that's something you're familiar with. It's not something to be feared. In fact, like you said, there's a bit of an effort there just to open it up enough to make it useful. Yeah, this is fantastic. So I mean, props to you for not relying on JavaScript or anything else like that. I think what we should do is maybe we'll post the report views somewhere along with the video. So if somebody wants to see the code, we can do that. And don't know how generous you're feeling Christmas season and all. If somebody wants to try these out with some of the RB subtags that you used, is that something we want to let people
Sure.
do?
We have been offering the subtag suite on a free basis. So for anyone who wants to use it, there are some 40 plus subtags in there. And soon we'll include one called list action, which will have things like pop, push, and remove and remove all, and a variety of things that probably should have been in the core product.
Yeah, very cool.
You're going to challenge anyone to join that?
Yeah. So what I'll do is, with the magic of post editing, here's the number to add in. I'll write some notes for how people can join our leaderboard. Yeah, that's right. It's right here. Oh, no, down. Yeah, definitely. We would love to see people try this out. I think one of the great things about this, like I said before, is seeing the different approaches people take to solving the same problem. And you've proposed, 4 different ways of using web reports to solve it. There's got to be, I know there's countless other ways to do it as well, and would love to see people's creativity in solving that. So the challenge is out there. Join us and, earn more points than us.
Yeah, that might not be hard because we may or may not do another one. I think we'll
Yeah,
probably try and do at least one more during Advent, but we've also got some real solutions to code too. So that was a
that's
nice,
right.
nice break, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Thanks again, Greg.
Right.